we're just about at the 6 o'clock hour. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's lecture. I'll take a few minutes to introduce Susan Burton, and I also have a little treat I want to show you. I'll give you a greater glimpse into who Ms. Burton is through a video that we have here as well, and then Ms. Burton will share her truly compelling and inspiring story with our university community and with members of the community at large that I see here tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. And she'll also be open to answering any questions that you may have for her. There will be a book signing immediately following the program from 7 to 7:30. So please make sure that you get copies of her book, and she'll be available to sign copies of Becoming Ms. Burton as well. Following the tragic accidental death of her 5-year-old son, Susan Burton's world collapsed. Her loss snapped the final tether of resilience, burdened by a past of pain and trauma. She descended into an emotional abyss of darkness and despair, yet was not offered the resources needed to heal. Without support, she turned to drugs and alcohol, which led to nearly 20 years revolving through cycles of incarceration. Drawing on her personal experiences, she founded a New Way of Life Reentry Project in 1998, dedicating her life to helping others break the cycle of incarceration. A New Way of Life provides resources such as housing, case management, employment, legal services, leadership development, and community organizing on behalf of and with people who struggle to rebuild their lives after incarceration. Since its founding, more than 1,000 women and children have found safety and support in 5 reentry homes that are sponsored by A New Way of Life, Susan's program. Over 300 women have been reunited with their children. Susan is widely recognized as a leader in the national criminal justice reform movement. She's a past Soros Justice Fellow, Women's Policy Institute Fellow, and Community Fellow under the California Wellness Foundation's Violence Prevention Initiative. Susan has served on the state's Little Hoover Commission and the Gender Responsive Strategies Task Force. In recognition of her leadership, she was appointed by Los Angeles County Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas as a member of the Los Angeles County Civil Brand Commission for institutional inspections. In this role, she is authorized to inspect Los Angeles County correctional facilities and advocate for the health and well-being of people housed there. Susan is a co-founder of All of Us or None and the formerly Incarcerated and Convicted People's Movement. Both national grass civil rights movements comprise the formerly incarcerated individuals, their families, and community allies. In collaboration with UCLA's Critical Race Studies program, she launched the Employment Rights Reentry Legal Clinic, which has grown to be the largest of its kind in Southern California. Susan has earned numerous awards and honors for her work. She is a recipient of both the Encore Purpose Prize and the James Irvine Foundation Leadership Award. In 2015, on the 50th anniversary of Selma and the Voting Rights Act, Susan Burton was named by the Los Angeles Times as one of 18 new civil rights leaders in the nation. Excuse me. Released in 2017, her memoir, Becoming Ms. Burton, received a 2018 NAACP Image Award for outstanding literary work in the category of biography and autobiography. Becoming Ms. Burton is also the recipient of the inaugural Goddard Riverside Stephen Rousseau Book Prize for Social Justice. And in 2010, Susan was named a CNN Top 10 Hero and received the prestigious Citizen Activist Award from the Harvard University Kennedy School of Government. And so for the special treat, here's a clip from the CNN ceremony where Susan was honored. If you have tissues, it might be a good time to break it out. So here, James said present, correct? Or is it movie?
Present is to dim.
Okay, present is not working. Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Never. Susan Burton was at home when grief knocked on her door. Her young son was struck by a car and killed. The loss shattered her world. She struggled with addiction, and for more than a decade, she moved in and out of jail. Then her life turned. She got clean, she found a job, she bought a house. A house not just for her, but for other women struggling just like she was. It's called A New Way of Life Reentry Project. And there are now 5 houses in Los Angeles where she's helped hundreds of women set things right. So many have a chance. So many have a chance because she didn't give up on them, and neither should we.
I remember the last time being released from prison. I was so elated to be walking out of the door, so excited. And the guard told me, I'll see you back in a little while. When you're released from prison, you're released with $200 and adios. And many people don't even make it past that downtown Skid Row bus station. I knew what to do. And I began to help women come home from prison. I bought a house. I put both legs up and I began to invite women into the house. We supported each other in recovery and a new way of life was born. What happens is a woman will write me a letter who is in prison, and I will find out what day she's released, and I pick them up at the prison. When she gets into the house, we begin to look at what she wants to do. It's just taking it day by day and being around everybody here. And getting to a possible continue with spiritual service and school.
I was living for 16 years before I came to America. Watching this burden give back makes you want to give back. And if I can help anybody to get to where I'm going, then we're going to hold hands and go together.
So you got everybody in the house is counting on you. I don't think I've ever been this recovered in 12 years later, and 500 women have been through here. I watched women go back to school and become drug counselors. I watched them become really great parents and get back custody of their children. I watched them become nurses' aides and open catering businesses. I watched them open up their own places to help homeless women have shelter.
I know I feel like the luckiest person in the world.
78% of people who come through the way of life have stayed out of prison, have went on to find their place in the community.
I'm moving on with it. I'm kind of like, I hate to leave the world like, you know, I didn't have a home when I get here. Alright. But it's home, right? This is home. This is always what we home. Little distance, but, you know, and, got it, so, let's just be good.
I didn't do this alone. People have me along the way. I believe that all of us have a gift and a purpose. And when we find that purpose, we become heroic. for being recognized by CNN as a 2010 hero. Through my life, I would never imagined I'd be in the category as a hero. And all of this would not have been possible without George Cameron. He stuck by me through so many years, so many dark days, and never gave up on me. He took me to recovery October 4th of 1997. And it's because of your support that I'm here today. It's been nearly 30 years since my son's death, and I miss him every day. But I know that he's smiling down on us and that he's proud of me. So I want to thank everyone who has supported me through the years to bring change for a better world.
Susan Burton, everybody.
That video still gets me. I want to thank Talitha for bringing me down to the University of Virginia, the historian, women's studies, and the studying of the mass incarceration of women. So I want to say thank you, and I want to give it up for you. When I found out I was coming here, I thought about the vision I had seen of the school and of people marching out of here with torches. And I thought, I'm gonna bring some love down there. Yeah, I'm gonna bring some love down there. But I also thought about my mom and dad, how they were running from that and moved to Los Angeles to try to escape the harsh realities of their lives in the South. And then to see it resurface in that fashion made me think that there's still a lot of work to be done in this world. So I'm trying to do my part of the work. When my mother and father ran from the South, they landed in a place, this community that had been built to receive them, and they were some projects called Aliso Village. And that's where I was born. And I was born into a lot of violence, different types of trauma, and poverty. Some of my earliest memories of a child is counting the palm trees as my mother drove my auntie to Camarillo State Hospital, where she was going to pick up her mentally ill boyfriend. And while he was there on leave, he was going to do things to me that I just didn't know how to verbalize, but I knew that they were wrong. And I remember counting those palm trees. And when I got to palm tree number 22, and I hadn't evaporated into that back seat, because I was really trying to evaporate into that back seat. And I hadn't evaporated into that back seat. He was going to walk down those stairs, and he was going to sit in the car next to me in the back seat, and I would be cringing all the way home. And those memories were the beginning, and there were multiple memories that compounded my childhood and my life as a young woman. And then I just learned to navigate it. I learned to, how would you say, sort of figure which trauma was going to be less damaging, and how to negotiate trauma, how to negotiate abuse, and just navigate it. Up until the time that I lost my son, and at that point, my body just couldn't hold anymore. I just could not endure another piece of pain, especially pain of your 5-year-old son, walking him home from school, and he's outside playing, and then he's gone. And he's gone at the hands of law enforcement. It was the LAPD detective that ran him over accidentally, but never got out of the car. Never ever acknowledged him or the police department that he had killed my son. And that was just like insult to injury, and I tried to drown my grief. I drank alcoholically. And then this stuff came to our community, and it just swept through our community like locusts on grain. And it began to just erode and wipe away, almost erase all of our community, especially the women. And I was one of the women. I went from drinking alcoholically to smoking cocaine, and then it transformed into smoking crack, and I went to prison. And I went to prison not one time, I went to prison 6 times. And you would have thought, you know, these are smart, educated people running our courthouses. You would have thought one of them would have said, you know, you have a problem. You have an alcoholism drug problem. And there's a solution. Would you like to try rehab? But that never happened for me. I remember one court day, I was in court. And in the back of the holding cell, this cement tomb, this room completely made of cement with a steel cold toilet in the back, or in the front, however you want to look at it. There was a newspaper there. And the newspaper had my mother's picture. And then I picked it up. And it was a picture of my mother, the councilman from my district, and in my son's school. There at the corner where my son had passed. And she was cutting on the light. And I took the paper into court with me, and I showed it to the judge, and I showed it to my public defender. And I'm like, this is what has happened in my life. And I need help. And will the court help me? And he sentenced me to prison that day. And it's like, you just shut the door and you cut everything off and you just try to do your time. because you cannot stand to feel what this world is dishing out to you anymore. And so I went to prison again. And this happened over and over again until October 4th of 1997, when I landed a bed in a place called Clare Foundation. And that was on the west side, the wealthy neighborhood, a couple of blocks from the beach. And I was just really, really, really lucky and fortunate to actually land a bed there and to begin the road of recovery. And there I found compassion. I found a safe environment. A matter of fact, I think it was the first time in my life that I ever felt safe. And I recognized that I felt safe. It's almost like you riding in a plane. I spend a lot of time in planes now. But you're riding in the plane and the captain says, you're free to go about the cabin. And it was like, I'm free to go about my life now. And I enrolled in classes, I attended therapy, and I began to heal. And as I began to heal, I began to recognize in that community, they didn't go to prison for what I went to prison for. They got a court card, or they were directed to treatment, or there was a diversion program, or community service. I remember I was in a 12-step meeting, and this guy stood up, you know, tall, good-looking white guy, and he was saying how he hated the color green. And he went on to say that he had been arrested for substance abuse and drunk driving, and he had an accident. And he was sentenced to painting the jail green. And I'm like, damn, you painted the jail green. I lived in the jail. What? You know, I had to live in that jail. And my thought is, you know, at that moment was, why didn't somebody invest a piece of paper in me and send me to a 12-step program? You know, didn't you see any potential in me? You know, why couldn't I have been invested in and thought about as a person that needed help instead of a person that needed to be punished, that needed to be enslaved in the criminal justice system, that needed to be chained and marched and worked? You know, why couldn't somebody see me? So, you know, that recovery home that I was fortunate enough to land in began a new life for me. So it was October 4th. This month I'm 21 years sober. And, you know, through those years, there's been another life created, all because I found a place that invested 100 days of recovery treatment in me. And I left that recovery home and wanted to recreate in South LA, this poor community, this disadvantaged, underinvested in community. I wanted to recreate what I had gotten in Santa Monica. And I thought if women just had a place to land, everything else would be all right. I was a bit naive, but having a place to land gives you at least a start at trying to create a new life. It's impossible. You know, women leaving prison, it's impossible for them to start all over without the support of the community or family, but just on their own, it's just impossible. So to date, so I saved money and I got this little house, and to date, there's actually 7 houses now. We've just got 2 more houses in in August, an agency. You know, God got a sense of humor. So when I was in prison, I used to pray, and I'm talking about pray hard. I would pray to go to this place called Harbor Area Halfway Houses. It was a place that you could go if, with 6 months of time left, and do that 6 months of time on the street. And I figured if I could get to Harbor Area Halfway House, I might have a shot at having the support to change my life. But I never got picked. I never got picked for Harbor Area Halfway House. Every time I was 6 months, 5 months to the gate, between 6 months and 5 months, I'd be praying really, really hard. Well, it happened that in June, the board of directors from Harbor Area Halfway House called me up and asked me if a new way of life would take over the agency because it was financially failing. And I was like, Well, it didn't save me, but now I need to save it. So God got a sense of humor. So we merged with the agency and took it over, and now we have about 25 more beds. It's a 5-bedroom, a 6-bedroom home. So now there's 7 places in LA County that women can access through a new way of life to continue on. The bills were running in, and they was behind and everything. And I'm like, what? In this day and time, but it is what it is. And so I said, God really got a sense of humor. But I'd like to read from you a story in the prologue of the book about this woman by the name of Ingrid. And it just speaks to how careful you have to be. There's no room for mistakes for women, formerly incarcerated Black women in poor communities. She had been to our home in 2007, and she had gotten it all together. She had gotten her children back. She had gotten the house. She had gotten the job, and she was back. She's back. And it was 2015, and she's back at a new way of life. So, in the prologue it goes, Ingrid's life changed in a single day outside a Dollar General store. Having scrounged up money to buy Pampers and baby formula, she took her screaming toddler with her and made a bottle in the checkout line, but left her sleeping baby in the car, windows open for air. Not more than 10 minutes later, when she returned to the car, the police was there. She was arrested for child endangerment. Though the baby was unharmed, the police impounded the diapers and the baby formula in the car. And despite Ingrid's pleas that the children were hungry and needed changing because of her history, she was guilty before ever standing trial. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison and lost custody of all 3 of her daughters. But I was silent while she blamed everything on herself, how she'd been frazzled and sleep deprived. And looking back, perhaps she had postpartum depression. Okay, I thought. But had Ingrid been a person of means? Had she been in a different neighborhood? Had she not been Black, would she have been sentenced to years in prison? Or would she have been given help, sent to parenting classes and therapy, resources that existed for certain people, but not for others? Did I even have to ask the question? Ingrid's story could have and should have been different. Same with my own story and the stories of most of the 1,000 women and their children who come through the doors of a new way of life, seeking safety, productivity, meaning, and fulfillment. So I keep asking the questions. Why are Black Americans incarcerated nearly 6 times the rates of whites? Why are prison sentences for African Americans disproportionately higher? Once released, Why do people face a lifetime of discriminatory policies and practice that smother any chance for a better life? Nearly 20 years ago, before I began looking at the big picture, before I fully recognized there was a big picture, I set out to offer a different type of refuge and support I wish I'd had. A house of women helping women. I came at it only with a GED earned in prison, without mentors and without funding. All I had was my life experience. All I knew was there had to be a better way. Now every day in South LA, around 100 now every year in South LA, around 100 newly released women and their children call a new way of life home. In a state where more than half of the people with a felony conviction will return to prison, our program has offered a mere 4% recidivism rate. We assist women with completing their education, finding jobs. We help them regain custody of their children. We provide 12-step programs, counseling, and peer support, all for less than a third of the cost of incarceration. Our annual cost per woman at a new way of life is $16,000, compared to an annual cost of up to, when I wrote the book, it was $60,000, now it's $75,000 to incarcerate a woman. But something bigger than I ever imagined happened. As we began telling our stories and talking about what was going around us, I found my voice. I could no longer shake my head helplessly and ask the same questions over and over again. It was time to change the answers. To that meant tackling many institutional barriers, laws and policies and attitudes that created mass incarceration and that continue to punish us long after we served our time. The 13th Amendment to the Constitution abolished slavery other than in prison, but it was a lie that you regained your freedom once you left the prison gates. Upon release and for the rest of your life, you face a massive wall of no's. The American Bar Association documented 45,000 legal sanctions and restrictions imposed upon people with criminal records, a near impenetrable barrier denying access to employment, student loans, housing, public assistance, custody of your children, the right to vote, and in many places, formerly incarcerated people are even blocked from visiting a loved one in prison. The minute I picked up a supposedly free Ingrid, these collateral consequences stared her square in her face. Our highest priority was to get her kids back. But before she could even attempt to regain custody of her daughters, we had to get her set up in permanent housing. But she had no money to pay rent. So first we had to find her employment. And of course, only a limited number of jobs existed for someone with a conviction. So you're starting to get the picture. By design, Ingrid's hopes and dreams were all but snuffed out, and her children's lives thrown into permanent disarray. That day, she made a faulty decision outside a Dollar General store. What I know is this isn't a problem that's going to go away all on its own. The United States has the largest prison population in the world, and women are the fastest growing segment of the prison population. And most of the prisoners will be released one day. I realized that formerly incarcerated people had no voice, and no one seemed willing to speak up for us. As I built a new way of life, sometimes it felt as though I was building a new underground railroad. It was taking shape. We the people weren't going to let each other fall. We would support, lead, and deliver people to a lasting freedom. So we would do all that we could so that women like Ingrid could get their lives back and make better lives for the children. Through a network I've cultivated over the past 2 decades, we began chipping away at what once seemed nearly impossible. We found Ingrid a job doing intake in a women's homeless shelter, working closely with the Department of Children and Family Services and with proof of her residence and a new way of life, Ingrid was approved to have her children on weekends while she pursued the longer process of regaining full custody of her children. She was putting money into the savings account and working with the housing agencies to find a permanent residence. One day she looked at me with a fire being returned to her and a big old grin. She got a big infectious grin. And with that sparkle in her eye, she said to me, "Miss Burton, I feel like I'm moving my life along." So that was over a year ago when this book was published in 2017. What I want to report to you is that Ingrid has gotten all 3 of her daughters back. She didn't settle for permanent housing. She is living in a market rate apartment, and she's paying market rate rent, and she's a rock star. Not only has she gotten all 3 of her children back, when she got home, her 15-year-old daughter, who was placed in foster care, was 5 months pregnant. So she's a grandma too. And she has the granddaughter too, and she's parenting. She's parenting like, I wish my mother would have understood me like that when I was 15, because I had a child at 15 too. She's actually on the staff of a New Way of Life now. She does our civic participation. She's organized about 30 volunteers to go into the jails all across LA County to register people to vote, to make sure we get the vote out. And she'll be working all evening until November the 7th, because that's when, I'm like, tell her, go take a week off. And she's a rock star, and I'm just really, really grateful that A New Way of Life is there to support her and to support other women, that they can find their voice, to find their power, be supported, to know each other and heal from the trauma before incarceration, but definitely from the trauma during incarceration. I went to George's, not George, J was a G, I was close. I went to George's house today, where they are ushering women back into the community, and it was great to be there to see places like that, for women to have a place to land and a place to heal and a place to find their voice and to find themselves. I want to open it up for any thoughts or questions that you might have. So I hope that was enough love to put out the flames that I saw, Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, I guess my question would be, and first of all, I'd like to say thank you for mentoring and helping women, incarcerated women, because I think that's very important. Like here in Charlottesville, we have a lot of nonprofit organizations that get a lot of money to help women and men come back into the community and be successful. But I think with a lot of the organizations that I see that's supposed to be providing the services, instead of them providing the services for the actual client that's coming out of prison, a lot of them are getting paid and not providing the services that people are really needing, and people are reoffending and going back to prison, but because they can't get housing or whatever it is that they need when they come home. So how, as an African American community, what can we do to hold these people accountable for making sure that people that come out of prison get what they need?
So, what I've learned is that, I can't make people be the change and the solution that I want to see. So I've been at it at New Way of Life for 20 years. And I have a model that I think that I perfected. So my next goal is to support the development of the model on a national scale. So what's happened in LA County is that I've definitely raised the bar on reentry. And it's recognized by the people that are using my services. It's recognized in the reentry community. It's recognized by our local officials. I mean, a judge came to me and asked me if I would contract with them because he knew that I was going to tell the truth about their services. So my thing is that don't waste your time critiquing and looking at other folks. Find out what you can do. Because you're bending your power when you are giving them blame. You take the power to control whatever that looks like for you, however small it might be, whatever it might look like for you. All right? All right. Leave them people alone. Let them do what they do. They'll make their karma. Yeah, they'll make their karma. You do what you need to do. You help however you can help.
You talked about the fact that while crack was ravaging the entire community, it was especially harming Black women.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know how you saw yourself, but also other women you encountered that suffered with addiction, either like reclaiming or redefining Black femininity during this time.
So, I don't know about Black femininity, I don't know about power. So, I'm gonna try to answer your question. I saw women, communities, and women deeply, deeply harmed, especially Black women. Their families destroyed and separated, lack of investment, them not even beginning to understand themselves, their lives, their purpose, just navigating one disappointment after the other disappointment. And I saw just a small investment. It's like dropping a little dew from the morning on the grass, and it beginning to turn green, and it beginning to grow, and it beginning to have, sustenance to it. That's what I see. That's what I see, daily. Our residents went to, so we take our residents, I take them into a Board of Supervisors meeting and to the state capitol and to our local, so we have a probation reform going on in LA County, and I took them to the probation reform meeting because they needed to hear from the people who were receiving probation services what that looks like. And it was in front of all of the probation supervisors, our Board of Supervisors. And they were just elated to be able to let them know that you're not doing nothing. And that gave them back somebody saw them. They were that's the type of, that's a part of recovery. You know, I don't drink and I don't use, but I also give voice to a lot of things. And I also show up and I resist, and I show up and I speak, and I show up and I work. And having all of that, and not only I do it, but everybody in the houses do it. So, is that what you mean?
Perfect.
Okay. She has some big feminism words and stuff over there, and I was like, oh no. Yeah. Yes.
Does a new way of life have any intention of incorporating Black men into their programs as opposed to the faulty courses?
So a new way of life consists of the 7 homes, a legal department. We have 6 attorneys on staff. We have an organizing and policy department. We have a leadership development department. So we have some pretty comprehensive services. There are 29 staff members and a new way of life. So we provide overall community organizing, policy, and legal services to the broader community, men included. But the housing piece is what I was called to do. It's my purpose, it's my passion, and it's with women. I don't plan, I've helped some men start some other places, but my lane is women. And it's important for me to know my lane and to thrive in that lane. So I'm not opening houses for men, but I'm giving them legal services free. All our legal services are free. Yeah. But there's a lot of men stuff around. We don't have a lot of women services. Probably in this county, men's services triple women's services. And that's what I found pretty universal across the land. We got a men and boys of color initiative. We don't have a My Sister's Helper initiative. And this is a national initiative. Former President Obama was talking about men and boys of color. I'm like, well, what about us? There was another hand back there. Is that all right?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yes.
How long do people stay, and what's your follow-up when people leave, and what's the liability with kids when they bring their kids?
So, women can stay as long as they need to. We have a model that provides immediate housing and support at a high level when women first exit prison or jails. And that's kind of, real comprehensive support. And then we have 3 other homes in the community where they can go and live after they've been in these 2 primary reentry homes. And they can stay as long as they need to stay. So our insurance covers anyone, including children, on the property. And we don't do child care. The mother is responsible for her child. So we don't have a liability for the children other than general liability. But a big worry with women is their children when they get out, and they need a place to be able to bring their children. And if we're going to ever repair the harms on our community of mass incarceration, we have to make room for children and for families to come back together and to be stronger and get stronger.
So what's the average length of stay, would you say?
The average length of stay is about maybe 9 to 15 months. But I haven't had a woman to stay there 4 or 5 years. She left when she got married.
fund focus?
So we have, I guess, pretty much across the board. When you get publicity like CNN, it really, really helps. So we get corporate funding, individual donors, foundations. We do gala fundraising. Our residents pay rent when they're able to pay rent. We charge 30% of their income up to $500. We have events, so, and corporations.
This may not be in the area of what you do, but I was just curious, you mentioned probation reform. You also talked a little bit about how you went to the more privileged neighborhood and they got some kind of treatments programs or whatever. I was just curious on, do you have any aims or focus on the system as a whole rather than the outcome of the prisoners? Do you try to reform the criminal justice system?
So we work on ballot initiatives, legislation, and proposition, and then reforming government, like the probation reform. So Proposition 47 was a ballot initiative in 2014 in California. And what it did, it reduced 6 felonies to misdemeanors, 6 nonviolent, low-level felonies to misdemeanors. And it took the cost savings out of the Department of Corrections and law enforcement and placed it into the community, into mental health, drug treatment, schools, and victim services. So that was a proposition that we worked really hard on, and that was driven by justice reform advocates, a new way of life included in that. What happened is the day that it passed, the next day, they had to open the doors and people just flooded out. Thousands and thousands of people had to be released from custody. And then the next year, those resources came to the community. So, and then there's Proposition 57 that gave people more good time credits if they participated in rehabilitation services inside of incarceration. And then there's SB 10, Senate Bill 10, that, 210, I'm sorry, 210 that made it possible for young people who were sentenced as juveniles to be reheard, and the board had to take into account the development of their brain when they committed the crime. And then that was from, I think ages 15 or 16 to 21, all those people to be reheard and resentenced and reevaluated for release. And a lot of them are coming home. We're getting some women at a new way of life who sentenced at 16 to a life sentence and have been in prison 15, 20 years, and we're getting them released, and we're actually supporting them at a new way of life. And then there was SB 260 who went back and raised the age to 25. So those types of legislations that we work on pretty much statewide to help reduce the number of people and not have people languishing so long in prison. I mean, I've been all over the country in 25 prisons this year, talking to women in some men's prison. I was in Ohio a month ago, and a woman stood up, a white woman stood up on a walker, and I was talking about the community and the environment and what you do when you get home. And she stood up and she said she had been there 40 years. And she had never used a cell phone. She had never used a microwave. And I was speechless. All I could say is that it just doesn't take 40 years to rehabilitate. It just doesn't. There's a woman in Georgia no, I'm sorry, there's a woman in Alabama. Her name is Geneva Cooley. Geneva's been in prison for, I think, 16 years now. 17 years. She's 72 years old. She had a drug possession.
Oh my.
They called it possession for sales. I couldn't believe it when I was there, you know, I sat down, I did a book reading, because I'm going into prison doing book readings. And when, after the book reading, I said, when are you coming home? And she says, I'm not. I got caught with drugs, and I got sentenced to life in prison. And I was just, what? And when I went home, I looked her up and did a little research. She has 4 sentences of 999 years, 99 months, and 99 days. A black woman in Alabama at Tutwiler Prison. So, you know, I contacted the University of Alabama, their legal department, and they're working on helping her to get released. I called Nicholas Kirstoff from the New York Times. He's went in with a camera. He's interviewed her. He's put her in a book that he's writing. But 999 years for a drug possession? And there's no way Alabama doesn't have a clemency opportunity in their law. I contacted Brian Stevenson. He said, we've looked into it, there's nothing we can do unless we can change the law. So I gotta train more English because she's younger. I might not be able to make it all the way through. All the work that has to be done, and then all of you are taking study programs and working and looking in there, so I'm inspired by what you all are doing. I'd like to hear maybe from some of you about what you're doing or what your plans are for the future. Somebody in here got a plan?
We've got a couple, maybe 1 or 2 minutes to hear your plan. Kira, yeah, no. I'm only putting you on the spot.
Kira.
But does anyone have any final words or anything they would like to share?
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, I'm Sue Hess, and I work with George's Healing House here in Charlottesville, and we do have a home for 12 women. Many of them have been in prison or are just coming from prison. So we're starting in a small way, but invite any of you to come visit us. We're on Ridge Street, 405 Ridge Street, and we welcome women to our house.
Sherry, did you? I don't even put you on the spot. We also have, thank you, Sue. We have another community leader here, Sherry Henley, who doesn't want to speak up, but she runs Lending Hands. So George's Healing House, Lending Hands. I can't think of any other.
What you do in Lending Hands? Can you stand any support or help?
Yes, I can. Well, I mean, I do pretty much similar to what Ms. Burton do. I help people find jobs and housing, information, you name it. Whatever challenges that they face when they come home is what I do. But I'm trying to get to the corporation. But and I've been doing it now probably, I don't know, maybe it's 2000. Well, I actually started, I was incarcerated, so I actually kind of started when I was incarcerated. I began to just find information and resources for women while I was inside, treatment programs and all that good stuff, so that they wouldn't have to stay inside.
So I do some of that, of the same stuff on the outside. And I work with, well, I had an interest in women too, like Ms. Burton did from the beginning, but I kept getting all these men when I first started out. And I had a contract with the jail where I drive people to work with me from the jail. And I kept getting all these men, but because that's another issue.
There's more men incarcerated than women, but women are the fastest growing segment. And so,
yeah. Because men are more likely to get work release as opposed to women.
Yeah.
And I don't know what is the reason for that sometimes, but don't as many women get on work release, and I don't know why. But so that's the stuff that I do in Charlottesville. So I, a little bit, kind of small, get a lot of volunteers from university students and things like that.
Yeah, I want to thank Talika for bringing me back out here, and I'm just really, really glad to have been here, and I hope I put the flags out, go in front.
Getting a copy of Ms. Burton's book, which is phenomenal. John Legend said so, and so did Brian Stevenson, Michelle Alexander, the LA Times, New York Times, and every other Times you can think of. It truly is a phenomenal work, so I encourage you to get a copy. And if you feel so compelled, feel free to, and this is independent plug, excuse me, feel free to make a donation to A New Way of Life, Georgia's Healing House, Lending Hands, or any community organization that's helping people to transition into society. Any reentry efforts locally that you can think of, even $2 makes a difference. So thank you so much for your time, and have a good evening.